Welcome to Mana's Potion. My name is Mitchell, but you may call me Mana. Today's Brutal Brew is a special one, because I was inspired when I came up with this challenge. For those of you who don't know, I stream over on Twitch a handful of times a week, and I often talk about whatever comes to mind there. Me and my infinite possibility of conversations and topics will always seem to trend towards one whenever the topic of anime comes up. Rising of the Shield Hero, and how awful that series is as both a light novel and an anime. Now don't get me wrong, there's no accounting for taste. If you like the adventures of the grumpy Naofumi and his merry band of slaves, then more power to you. I imagine for several of you that just turned you off from giving it a shot. I, however, love to hate on it, and at this point, read the books to continue to dunk on it. And before I anger even more of the strawmen in my head, I thought to myself, I could probably do a better job than Naofumi when it comes to being a shield hero, because unlike him, I would actually think to smack a monster with my shield, rather than just punch them. Alas, I am not unfortunate enough to be summoned into another world and bound to only wield a shield as my weapon. But I can do that in video game form, so I thought I'd try my hand at it in Last Epoch. So begs the question, can you beat Last Epoch with shields only? So first, let's go over the rules. First, I'm only allowed to equip shields in our hands. No weapons of any kind allowed. If we're going to prove we're better than the shield hero, then we follow the same restriction. Second, I'm only using skills that use our shield in some way. This rule's a little nebulous since we get access to a skill later on that doesn't use our shield specifically, but it does make shields and those are our shields, so I allowed it. Third, pretty much any and all equipment is otherwise fair game. It's not my fault now if we didn't think to find armor that swaps his defense and offense values. And last, no cheating or exploits. I can't exactly say I'm better than someone if I cheated to achieve victory. Get it? Got it? Good. So, strategy. Since we can't use skills that don't use the shield in some way, and I checked, the basic attack doesn't use the shield either, that really limits us to one class based on my pre-challenge research, the Sentinel. Specifically if we go down the route of Forge Guard. So we make our man and name him Brennan. This way we have access to 4 total skills: Shield Bash, Shield Rush, Shield Throw, and Ring of Shields. Sure, you might be able to argue Rebuke is a skill we should be allowed to use, but I ultimately opted not to. We shouldn't rely on abilities that a normal person couldn't use in some way, even if these skills are a little supernatural in what they allow a person to accomplish anyway. I also made the decision that I won't make it so these skills add on spells too much. Making it so my shield's on fire when I smack a guy? That's fine. Making it so my shield explodes in a shrapnel when I do that? Not fine. Though it's not a hard and fast rule, so if for some reason my build isn't optimal, you can post in the comments how and why, but yeah. Other than that, the only other thing to know is when I get these skills. How early do I get my first skill? Level 7? Oh boy. Off to a wonderful start already. You'd think the run is dead in the water right here, but I will give Naofumi some credit. He's not wrong that early on it's best to get some help. We rush through the intro into the burning forest and say hi to Grail, a man of great stature and baby soft knuckles. He is the key to how we'll get from level 1 to 7, though not until after we exhaust the area of enemies and are firmly stuck at level 4, which is not great. But if you run back to the beginning of the zone, leave the area, then come back, the enemies will return. Now this might seem like an exploit, except that it isn't. Design like this is to allow the player to over-level so they can avoid getting stuck on a boss fight. Don't worry, we won't grind too much.
Where'd you learn to fight?
I feel like I'm being mocked. We invest our earned passive points into being tankier, for if the weaponless run taught me anything, is that no weapons mean you shouldn't invest in percentage increases. And after a handful of resets, we finally hit level 7 and unlock our first usable skill, Shield Bash. And it... Holy crap, does it suck. Long cooldown and low damage? Well, low because we don't have a weapon for it to scale on. Well, this is bad. Even after investing a specialization point, it's not much better. We could sit here for a while and keep grinding, but we don't have a reason to stay back any longer. So we push on and let Grail do most of the work for the first boss. We part ways in the camp, then make our way to the garden to go find an old man and the MacGuffin he's guarding. And let me tell you, it's incredibly slow going. Like, it literally took me an hour to get through and full clear the gardens. The only reason enemies are able to be downed at a remotely reasonable pace is because of a relic I picked up that gives me a 1 in 7 chance of igniting enemies on melee hit. Again, not my fault Naofumi thought slaves were the right way to go. When do I get my next skill anyway? Oh, for the love of 10 passive points invested? That's like level 12 if my math is right. That's gonna take forever. As we make our way up onto the wall, we get to deal with our first boss without help. Styriax the Burning Sky. And it's here it really set in what I signed up for. This boss fight by myself, much too long a slog. And it was boring. He could barely hurt me, and I was barely hurting him. Not to mention a new mechanic was added since last I played, where at set intervals, he's warded for full health until I either get rid of it or enough time passes, which takes even more time. And as a quick aside, I'm not quite a fan of this mechanic, though it does mean you will see everything a boss can do in your own playthroughs. Eventually, I think he dies of boredom. I'm not convinced I was hitting him hard enough with my shield to kill him. We eventually find a wounded soldier with a quest for us, and we take a brief detour through storage, learn about the reworked shrines that give us back a lot of time wasted waiting for cooldowns. Hey, look, I never said I couldn't use shrines. And then deal with the Osprix within. The soldier gives us a reward for our trouble, a free passive point. So my math earlier would have been correct if not for these kinds of quests. Granted, I'm so overleveled that it's going to hardly matter, but it won't be too long before we get Shield Rush with quests like this. On to the vault!
Protect the sun! The drink! Tread carefully.
Good to see you too, Balthus. We let the old man handle the majority of the enemies that funnel in, smacking them senseless whenever the opportunity arises. See, it's not that hard without a sword wielder. Worth noting that before coming into the vault, I got myself a piece of armor that's crucial for my sanity in the run, as it has a modifier on it that reflects damage onto enemies when I'm hit. So while Shield Bash's damage is horrendous, so long as I have the enemy's attention, I can do okay damage now. Feels bad though, because this early game has now basically become a discount Thorns only run. We then get escorted out and take a short stop on a bluff so we can confirm the safety of the MacGuffin, because that's very necessary to do in broad daylight, just after escaping your enemy when your enemy can fly! This is why we should have gone farther away. Well, I guess it's up to me to rescue the old dude. We head past the camp, getting a third free passive point and our second skill, Shield Rush. It honestly doesn't add much to our damage, but hey, at least I can do more frequently. And that's a win I'll take. It's a very, very tiny W. Granted, I have no earthly idea what to do with Shield Rush as far as specializing it, as there's no real reason to pick up can be used without a shield, and I don't want to grab fires a laser out in front while charging. Rad as that sounds. So don't be too surprised if later on you see it do one thing, then it does something else. A lot of run with these two skills was me making it up as I went. I eventually find an enemy modifier that worries me a fair bit. Heals after not taking damage for a while, which you would think that damage reflection would count, but nope. Guess cursed shields aren't a solution to all my problems. So fingers crossed we don't happen upon too many enemies like this early on. Huh? Foreshadowing? What's that? We also give Power Rush a try, which fires off Shield Bash at the end of Shield Rush. Nope! It just consumes Shield Bash's cooldown, so I promptly fix that mistake. I break through the Osprix war camp, then come face to face with their leader, Haruspex Orion. And, this fight takes a long while. Let me just... Nope. Further. Further. There we go. What? Do you want me to say the strategy is avoid the bad and smack the boss when you can? Because that's basically the strat. Hell, there's no real risk of dying if you do it right. Granted, because of damage reflection, I could take a number of hits intentionally, but otherwise, yeah. Come on, Balthus, we got a future to save.
I'll finally be able to...
Not quite what I meant. Balthus? Where'd you go, Balthus? We pick up our piece of the Epoch, start escorting a soldier who somehow does worse damage than me. Honestly, how did you guys manage to live this long even with the Epoch protecting you? And he's dead. Well, shit, I guess so far Naofumi's better at protecting others than me. I get told to rendezvous outside Last Refuge, watch an old man destroy some foul abomination, then get told that one Elder Panini is studying the Epoch. I fine-tune some of my gear and go out to locate him so I can better understand what I'm dealing with. It's on this outing that I fight one of those mage in a box, and he drops a very interesting build. When I drink a potion, conjure up 2 volatile zombies. Now I can absolutely say I'm better than Naofumi. I resorted to necromancy a la spawning explosive zombies before I resorted to slavery. I'm gonna get a lot of flack for this, aren't I? We eventually find Panini's students, and it turns out that all of them might be under the influence of this corruption. Well, don't that just beat all? This fight, right here, demonstrates a lot of my strategy up to this point. Soak up damage, smack them where I can, heal up when I need to. And that's really all there is to it. Right. Students dealt with. And Panini stole the piece of the Epoch. Cool, cool. Guess I have to do everything around here. We pretty much do the equivalent of I don't want to get hurt so I'll max my defense for a while as we go find out where Panini wandered off to. Dying to the Void Fuse Forge while I kill it for the 2nd time in these challenge runs. What is it with this thing? And eventually, taking several more hours than I had any right to, make it to Panini. He tells me to run, and I tell him not without the Epoch. He must have been offended by that because he turns into an abomination. I'd say this fight was difficult, but if anything, it was just tedious. Like, I literally just waited for him to die because I had to wait for my cooldowns and wait for him to hit me. Oh, and run around is to not get hit by his multiple multi-hit spells. I knew that standing in spells would still reflect damage back to the caster, but what I didn't realize is that standing in certain spells, more often than not, these were like straight line spells or spells that weren't connected to the caster, like they were the center of the origin. It's a little bit more convoluted, but anyway. Generally, those kinds of spells would only reflect damage once. So, since they are multi-hit, you would just be taking more damage, and thus would want to start avoiding those abilities, rather than just standing there with buggy eyes and slack jaw. So, I guess this was the most active fight I've had so far. After what felt like an hour, he goes down, which marks the end of the early game. Jeez, it only took me 8 hours. I'd have gotten here in a quarter of the time, if not a little more on a normal run. We say hi to End of Time Gaspar, who lets us pick which mastery we'll have, which Forge Guard, obviously. And now we can determine in-game when I'll get my next ability. Oh, 5 passive points in the skill tree. Shame I can't just re-slot my passive points now, because I need at least 20 in the base tree to invest in any of the mastery trees. Shame that. But what can you do? We make like Marty and get back to the future, where we start our pilgrimage to get the final piece of the Epoch, so we can get the rest of the game going. And between more quest reward passive points and levels, we get the skill I've been waiting the entire challenge for so far. Shield Throw. Fucking finally, a skill with a reasonable cooldown that does more than a sliver of damage. Still bad damage compared to what you could do normally, but relative to what I've been doing, this is a massive improvement. Not only that, but earlier on I picked up a point in the Shield Bash specialization that lets it so it'll ricochet more times after I perform a Shield Bash. Yeah, now we're at cruising speed, if cruising speed was 5 miles an hour. Come level 20, we slot Shield Throw into its own specialization and get to work lowering its cost with the aim to make it have no cooldown at all. While that will drastically reduce how many times it can bounce around off of enemies, it will increase how much damage I can do with it overall. See? Told you I can be better than the Shield Hero. After enough points in the Shield Bash, I make it so I'm mugging enemies for potions with it. Find a glitch where shield rushing downstairs will make you run into the void beneath the world. Honestly, that's a weird one. Then encounter this season's mechanic, the Nemesis. I was encountering this spawning earlier and fought it a few times, but it wasn't until now that it actually had something I wanted. A chunk of rock called the Slab. Granted, I did empower this particular Nemesis, so the shield in question is better, but now we're chucking a whole ass rock at people. Frankly, this shield's kind of garbage as an actual shield, so it won't stay with us for the entire run. But if or when it does block, it's at least soaking a lot of damage for us. Plus, I think the idea of just throwing a rock at people is fucking hilarious. Return to Slab. Okay. Whoop. Eventually, I decide Shield Throw deserves to be on fire when I throw it. Defeat a loot lizard in 4 more, which results in a loot explosion. Fuck yeah, loot? How am I gonna carry this? And in the loot explosion, get another unique that subverts the rules even more than the reworked shrines do. The River Bend Grasp. With this equipped, there's a chance on attack that I'll throw a hammer, which hammer throw is an ability that I can absolutely do under normal circumstances. However, the stipulation of the rules is that I, me, myself, and I, cannot use skills that don't use a shield. Nothing about the rules say my gloves can't. Again, Not my fault Naofumi didn't think to grab magical gauntlets that let him throw ethereal hammers, or a belt that lets him drink potions to summon explosive zombies, or a chest piece that— oh, hold that thought. We later also find a belt called Thorn Slinger. And as you can imagine, yes, it does in fact cause enemies to take damage when they hit me. Goodbye, zombie spawning belt. I no longer need the powers of necromancy, but I shan't forget you. It's so fast, too. So the strawmen in my head are asking the question, Mana, why aren't you talking more about difficulties or events in the run so far? Simply put, once I got shield throw, it really just has been a lot of hold the ability button down to win. It's quite simply my only skill worth a damn. Hell, the way I'm building my passives, they don't really matter either. It's all making me tankier with a higher block chance. The only passive that's interesting is Thornmail, but really what that does is reinforce allegations that this is really a Thorns only run, but I'm allowed to use shield skills. Well, with that said, it's pretty much a straight shot from here. We get the last piece of the Epoch and begin the time warp to hopefully stop the end of time. During the Imperial era, do we get our final skill, Ring of Shields? This is a nebulous skill at best, if it should be allowed, but seeing as they're shields, I allowed it. Then later give it Fire Aura, which I thought would do more, but it genuinely never felt like it. Beyond that, we pretty much just tank and spank everything. What? Tank and spank. You know, I take damage, and then I smack them back. What'd you think I meant? So I guess outside of a miracle happening, this is it. A slow, long climb to the end of the game. All while I play some sort of Olympic sport involving bouncing a metal disc off of as many targets as possible. I mean, I guess it's more interesting than getting a cursed shield that makes me overpowered. It's not all bad. There just isn't really anything to talk about. The nature of action role-playing games is that gear comes and goes, and as such, there's not much strategy behind what I wear other than, are these numbers better than my current numbers? Or does this give me a unique advantage that my other equipment couldn't give me? The worst part? The run's just boring. It's not hard. Well, I wouldn't say it isn't fun. It's more fun to play than it is to look at. You know, feeling the game crumbling a little bit under the strain of your stupid build kind of fun. Like playing a mage and deciding, no, fuck using spells, it's auto attack only. And then finding out it's not only doable, it's actually quite easy and weirdly competitive. Attack damage only, Ari, I will miss thee. While a lot happens during the Imperial era, the final boss of the era is barely worth mentioning. I mean, it is a refight with two of the bosses through that act, but now at the same time. So while my health does get dangerously low, I'm too tanky and I can just punch potions out of enemies, so I'm not at risk of dying, usually. So it's back to the Divine era, the original time. Then, ooh, what's this? Calamity. You know, this would be an awful pick for the Sentinel in any other run, but considering my shield does fire damage— holy shit! And here I thought I was going to get to talk about how the game's starting to seriously slow down, but nope. Game's almost rewarding me for my stupid build at this point. Guess I know how the other heroes feel. We reunite with Grail, show off that, yes, I really can fight now, get the new MacGuffin of the Lance of Heorot, get it blessed by the god himself before he perishes, move on to catch a boat to do the same with Lagan, kill his attendant— look, it's complicated, I know I'm going really fast. She said I wasn't allowed to see him, but the fate of the world is at stake, and then one thing led to another, and then encounter the first boss with any amount of strategy worth talking about. Lagan, God of Storms. Now, for only dying once, I must admit Lagan's not terribly easy. The amount of attention I had to give this boss is far more than the bosses before him. While, yes, I will confess it was just a lot of dodging, Lagan is the first boss that has the damage output to make my level of tankiness irrelevant. Plus, he can only be damaged by damaging his tentacles, or so the tentacles claim. I wasn't paying much attention to if his damage was being reflected properly, but I imagine it was. The dodge roll can be crucial to avoid the bulk of damage from his Storm Eye Beam thing, and it's important to note his telegraphs and move when appropriate. Unless you like being stunned and then be forced to drink a potion. Once he's damaged enough, he'll phase transition and force you to deal with his additional tentacles as adds. Oh, and proper adds will spawn too. Were this an enrage mechanic, no doubt I would have failed it. But it's more survive for X seconds or defeat all the specific adds, which I do both, weirdly. The tidal waves did considerable damage, while the adds themselves weren't much to worry about. likening me to the shore. The enemies dashed themselves upon the rocks, so to speak. Once that's done, it's back to dealing with the same attacks from the start with Lagan. With enough patience, he goes down in short order. I guess I can solo God, huh? For all that trouble, he blesses the spear. Cool. Awesome. Wait, why am I doing this again? I can't even wield this, and I didn't start this adventure with the spear-wielding dimwit to give it to. Okay, I'll stop with the Shield Hero Bash references. With Lagan defeated, it's on to the final chapter of the game. The game is done fooling around, throwing everything and anything at me to slow me down. It's a shame, then, that I'm an unbreakable object at this point. Bleh. Mostly. We traipse through the desert, spend way more money than we had any right to, pick up Thornshell, a new shield that I think Naofumi would be jealous of, blast through the Osprix, and muscle my way into the temple. Literally and, well, literally. With enough time spent, we finally come face to face with the corrupted god Majasa. You know, I just noticed she doesn't have a title like Lagan. That's weird. Anyway, time to put her out of her misery. So, Phase 1 is arguably the harder of the two phases in this fight. Majasa typically starts by trying to petrify you, so either charge out of the cone or dodge. She'll then go through a myriad of spells, and much like many of Lagan's attacks, these do enough damage that it's better to not get hit by them. At least too terribly many of them. Once Majasa takes enough damage, she'll dive into the sand and summon 3 pylons. While my footage would claim otherwise, the fire pylon is of higher importance, because of how many shots it throws out. With damage reflection, it goes down easily enough. Followed by poison, since its attacks are multi-hit and don't trigger damage reflection more than maybe once. Then the lightning one. I couldn't take them down before Majasa resurfaced, but juggling her mechanics and the mechanics of the pylons never proved too difficult. Once her health bar is taken down once, Phase 2 begins. Majasa forgoes all forms of magic, mostly, and will just be aggressive with physical attacks. Because these are all distinct hits, it's best to soak these attacks and let damage reflection trigger, getting out of petrification vision whenever possible. She does throw out some sort of blood spell and absorb back the blood, both times the blood exploding when it lands and when she absorbs it back, respectively. And I chose not to take my chances in case those attacks were incredibly high damaging. Instead of summoning adds, Majasa will simply heal back to full at about 60% and 40% health, meaning we basically have to drain the health bar a total of 3 times. Keep your chin up, hold down the shield throw button, and victory is inevitable. Guess I can save the world alone. And that's that. Can you beat Last Epoch with only shields? Shockingly, yes. Aside from the endgame monolith stuff, that's Last Epoch beaten with shields. I honestly knew this was going to be something of a slog, so I was mentally prepared for that, but I wasn't expecting the challenge to find footing and a workaround to my otherwise poor damage output like Calamity or damage reflection. Is there a way to optimize this build so you could potentially do more with it? Yeah, probably. Gods only know what combination of items, effects, and passives you could pull with these shenanigans. For now, Brennan will rest, yet he'll probably return. I'll be honest, this didn't dull the desire to be a better shield hero, and I know at least one other game where I can lead the charge with shields. But until then, please remember, you're always welcome here at Mona's Potion, and I'll see you next time.